All right, back on the conversation. Ben Winck is going to join us. He's an economy reporter in The Insider. It's an interesting point about jobs and housing and if they're interconnected. Ben, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So you've got an interesting thesis here that if people can't afford housing, they might not be able to get a job. Help us understand the connection.
Yeah, so this is a trend or a phenomenon that we saw before COVID even. The wonky term for it is a spatial mismatch. Essentially, it means when there isn't affordable housing where the best job opportunities are, and all the areas that have affordable housing don't have the best job opportunities. So the jobs and the housing just aren't matching, and that's been really just blown up over the pandemic, right? We've seen house prices just skyrocket, and we also have this labor shortage going on where in most states, there aren't enough workers to fill all the job openings we have. So at the moment, all these big job hubs, cities, areas that have seen housing go up so much, they don't have the housing opportunities for especially low wage workers and people who are trying to get their first homes and get settled in and kind of climb that socioeconomic ladder.
So Ben, I'm going to tell you about a microcosm of that, and then we'll talk about it in the bigger context. But a little while back, my family and I went to vacation to Jackson, Wyoming. And so one of the towns around there is very upscale, and they had a massive labor shortage, and half the restaurants weren't open. The others were open only for a brief period of time, for it could only take a small number of people, giant lines at the McDonald's, etc. And I asked around and I said, why? And it turns out they have no affordable housing at all. So there was nowhere to live, and it's Wyoming, and they had to drive hours and hours, and people thought, I don't want to drive hours and hours and get paid low wages, so they had nobody to work. It was kind of amazing. Is that the phenomenon we're talking about? That might be a really intense case of it, but that's basically what's happening in the larger cities as well?
Yeah, that's certainly part of it. I mean, there are only 8 states right now that have enough workers to fill every job opening, right? Wyoming isn't one of them. And so, in some cases, right, it's the cities that don't have affordable housing, but it can also be these towns or smaller cities out in Wyoming that are, even though they have a dire need for jobs, housing just isn't available. It's even tougher out there because you don't have a city that you can connect through public transit. It's harder to kind of just to spread some of that affordable housing or that interest, that job interest from a major city. So somewhere like that, it's even tougher.
So in a city like LA or San Francisco, is commute a part of it? Because so if you go far enough out so I'm using LA because we were in LA as an example, and I know it better. If you go far out enough, I guess you could find affordable housing, but it would take you a couple hours to drive back into LA for your job. And does that make the job then unaffordable because you're spending so much time commuting? Is that part of the problem here, or am I missing it?
That's part of it. So it's definitely one half of the problem, right? The solution from the experts that I've spoken with, they say it needs to be two-pronged. So on one hand, and obviously LA does not have the public transit that you see in New York or even somewhere like San Francisco. So that definitely hits it pretty hard, especially when traffic is an issue and people are driving hours to get to work. So on one hand, you can up housing density, you can up zone in some areas and create those affordable housing opportunities in LA or near transit hubs that can get people to the most promising job hubs. So that's the housing supply side of it. You bring in more affordable housing, you boost housing density, you upzone, that can help. On the other hand, if you can move government funding, get some private sector interest in areas outside LA, communities that have more affordable housing, but don't have as promising job prospects, that's the other side of it, right? You can move investment interests out there. You can either through tax breaks or public policy. If you can kind of kickstart that cycle and create a new job hub where housing is already affordable, while still the important part is preserving the affordable housing out there. That can be through renter protections or even building more homes in those areas. If you can create a new job hub, that can not only create job opportunities for people who already live in these affordable areas, but also take some of the pressure off of the middle of LA and the most unaffordable and job-packed areas.
This is a little bit tangentially. You didn't write about it, but it's related to this story. So you write about how there's 10 million job openings that still remain at the end of August, for example. Well, I thought the right wing said that the immigrants were coming to take our jobs. So why haven't they taken our jobs? Why is there still, if we have a crisis at the border and the immigrants have flooded into America and they came to steal our jobs, why won't they take them?
I mean, part of the tough challenge that we're facing now is the jobs, no matter who's taking them, they just don't pay enough. At the moment, right, inflation is still pretty high. The month over month has cooled down a little bit, but it's still near decade highs. And a lot of these jobs, yes, they've seen wages climb, but they haven't climbed in at the same pace that prices have. And so a lot of these jobs, it's sectors that were hit hardest by the pandemic, right? We're thinking about service industry, low hours, relatively low wages. And sure, in some cases, some of those sectors have seen really big percentage wage growth, right? So leisure and hospitality is probably the biggest one. Wages have boomed on a percentage basis, but on a dollar basis, they're still relatively low. And so people are waiting, really. They're seeing that, okay, those are the opportunities that are out there, but if I still have some stimulus money on the side, I have a bit of a financial cushion and I can wait, maybe look around a bit more, or maybe develop some new skills or move into a sector that is more promising. We're seeing a lot of people do that. Now, how long that can go on for, we don't know. We thought that, once unemployment benefits lapsed and schools reopened, maybe that would end the labor shortage or bring more people off the sidelines. But people really are biding their time. And part of that is just because a lot of the jobs out there aren't very promising or don't have the wage prospects that people are hoping to see.
Yes, so in this reconciliation bill that they're considering, is any of this addressed?
On the housing side, yes. On one hand, it was slimmed down. I think it was originally almost $360 billion for housing back when it was a $3.5 trillion plan. Now it's about $150 billion. So, we've seen this throughout the new plan, the $1.75 trillion. A lot of things are still in there. They're just slimmed down quite a bit. But there is funding to build and preserve another million or a little over 1 million homes. That's the estimate. And then there's funding for vouchers, for the Housing Trust Fund, for public housing opportunities. The problem is we have a housing shortage that's way bigger than just 1 million homes. Estimates range from about 4 million to nearly 7 million. So yes, that would help, especially upzoning in some neighborhoods that are already pretty densely packed, or creating job hubs and really prosperous communities outside of cities. But it's just not enough homes. And so we're waiting for maybe builders to come up and shore up supply. But they have a business to run. And if their margins aren't attractive enough, then they're not going to build more homes and get us to that number that we need. So yes, there is funding to help solve this issue, but a lot of people argue it's not enough.
And if, based on your reporting, if it turns out we put more money into housing, it looks like it might help ameliorate our labor shortage issues.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the labor shortage is, there are still around or nearly 8 million people who are unemployed, right? And we have all these job openings, but as we start to match people with jobs, we'll start to figure out, okay, where people need to live, how we're doing this whole telework thing, how many people can work remotely away from maybe their physical office. But at the moment, people are just trying to find homes, settle down, and move to areas that have the economic prospects that they're looking for. I mean, right now, millennials are in their peak home buying years, right? They're trying to set up a household and lay those foundations. And that doesn't just have to do with getting a home, but it has to do with also having the right job. And so if we can alleviate some of the pressure in the job market, make it a bit easier to find a home, that not only helps people kind of settle in and build their local economies, it helps the local economies match people with jobs and takes pressure out of those cities where we just don't have enough affordable housing at the moment to match people with a lot of these jobs that don't offer enough pay to afford to live in those cities.
Right, and obviously the homelessness is another issue that's addressed by housing. And so in LA, for example, homelessness has skyrocketed. And it's not like all of a sudden people had more mental health issues or addiction issues out of nowhere. No, the extra people are almost all people who couldn't afford housing. And then when you can't afford housing, you also can't get a job because it's hard to take a shower, et cetera. So it's this vicious cycle that needs to be broken. Like you said, some of the funding is good. It would have been better to have more, obviously. So I just want to ask you one last thing about this stat, because it's so interesting, I want to understand it better. You wrote in here, metropolitan areas and counties face 10-point drops in job growth for every 1 unit increase. Help me understand that stat.
Yeah, so the study that figured that out, they created a ratio or an index that calculates, when affordability and this can be in a metropolitan area, it could be in around states, but they said it matched with a lot of these more densely packed areas throughout the U.S. It didn't just have to be on the coasts, but for every 1 unit increase in housing affordability, which in this case means homes got less affordable, job creation and job growth plummeted. And that kind of goes to what you were just saying, right? It's not just that we need to build more homes to kind of match people with jobs and get through this labor shortage. It's also that if we don't have affordable housing, local economies really seize up, right? You don't have the same prospects. Once people, if homes get too unaffordable, people can't move in. That can't then grow the local economy. People aren't going to invest in businesses and create jobs. That can then knock home values. And so you get into this nasty cycle of people not knowing to come in or out, not knowing, is this going to be a place where I can really settle down? And so, yeah, like that study showed, it doesn't take that much more of a jump in housing unaffordability to really start to see the effects in a local economy. Job growth sinks, and that gets into a pretty nasty spot.
All right, Ben Winck from Insider, really good reporting here. Thank you, Ben, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.